So my purpose to be here is to share my story and to make sure that the things that I went through as a young girl into my teens don't happen to other young women. So, as many young detrans females are, I am a victim of sexual assault, and from a young age. And it definitely skewed how I viewed my body, and I actually ended up early onset puberty from that, which was very traumatizing. And not only that, but sexism within cultures, like my family's from Latin America, and it's still a very sexist culture in a lot of those places. So I grew up thinking I was definitely lesser than. I was destined to just grow up and be a housewife, and that's not something I wanted. So I started going on the internet around when I was 10 years old, at least on the internet without parental supervision. And as many young Gen Z are traumatized by the things that they have seen at a very young age on the internet, including pornography and violence. And that really sent me down a spiral of finding out what the trans community is, what transitioning is, and it being sold to me as a solution to my problems. You're a young woman who does not like her body, who does not like how she is treated by the people around her because she is a young woman. She's victimized because she is a young woman. We ended up on various social media websites. I've ended up on various social media websites, and one of those that was very powerful in perpetuating trans ideology was Tumblr. That was a very big one. Prisha was a very active user on there as well. It's so bad. It's very bad. And from then on, you're kind of sold, oh, well, this is gonna fix me. I have so many emotional problems, not to mention I am also diagnosed autistic. So, if you're a young, confused girl, this is your solution, apparently. So, I ended up identifying as male and coming out around the age of 12. And I ended up starting hormones at 14. I was not really well informed on what these hormones would do to me at the time, like many women in my case, and I know Prisha can attest to that. We aren't properly told what these cross-sex hormones are going to do to us, not even in 5 years' time, let alone 10, 20, your whole life, you're supposed to be on these hormones. So, I started hormones at 14, and I was over the moon. I had a chance to reinvent myself. I had a chance to make a better life for myself, whatever that meant at the time. And after 3 years of hormones and spiraling and not getting better at all, I finally decided to detransition. And during that time, I actually had a suicide attempt while I was under the care of one of these doctors, and he kept prescribing me testosterone, even though there were very clear signs of other things happening and going on in my mind. These hormones have deeply affected me, not only my physical appearance, but my physical health as well. With my second hormone doctor that I was seeing down in Florida after I moved from Rhode Island with my original doctor, she diagnosed me with hypothyroidism, and that eventually spiraled into an autoimmune disorder called Hashimoto's disease. And the only other person in my family who has this is my father. I wholeheartedly believe if I did not take hormones, this would have not happened to me. So now my thyroid has little to no function. I have to take meds every day. I'm in constant physical pain. I have constant chronic fatigue. And it is very hard to find support from doctors about this situation and about the effects that testosterone had on this and on my physical health. I was a very healthy child. The only thing that I've ever really been hospitalized for was a spider bite on my leg when I was like 8. And to go from that to now being disabled, I can't do a lot of things. I can't work a job. I had to leave my job as a kennel nurse at an animal hospital because of these things. And I feel like my life was taken away from me. And I feel like if I wasn't affirmed, if I was just, well, maybe let's get a little more therapy, this would have never happened to me. But hello. And my mission now, seeing all these young girls just perpetually harmed, even thinking back to when I was in that first gender clinic in that office, seeing so many young girls who were probably going through the same thing that I was. And knowing that they were probably struggling as well. And this was the solution that they were given. And it's now my mission to make sure that this doesn't happen to any other young women. We don't deserve to be science experiments.
Hi, my name is Pia Mosley. Just like my friend Isabelle, my story did not. Hey. So yeah, my story also didn't start at the gender clinic. I was raised in a chaotic home. I also see my parents as victims of the gender industry because not only was I lied to and tricked and coerced as a mentally ill minor, my parents, who were diagnosed with things like BPD or PTSD and anxiety and other things, were also blackmailed with threats of my own suicide. Previous suicide attempts were used by my gender clinician as proof that I hadn't been affirmed fast enough. I started receiving psychiatric care around 11 or 12 years old because I was growing taller but losing weight. I wanted to have control of my body. I didn't like it. I didn't like the way I felt, and I didn't have control of any other parts of my life. And it's not a healthy way to cope, to change the one thing you can, being your body, through harm. And my doctors and therapists knew this when I was diagnosed with anorexia and bulimia, and I was being treated for that. When I weighed 85 and 90 pounds, no one agreed that I was fat. But after a sexual assault at 14, which resulted in a pregnancy that could not be sustained due to the eating disorder, I went on Tumblr, and I was on the pro-ana community. The pro-ana community is a community of being pro-anorexia, like for anorexia. It promotes it, and the internet, particularly websites like Tumblr, are like a buffet of different forms of self-harm, just to pick and choose what makes you feel better. Girls go online and start posting, I can't eat, I'm fat, I hate myself. And then other girls and women come and say, you're not crazy, I feel that way too. I'll be your Anna buddy. We can hold each other accountable. If you're hungry, text me and I'll encourage you not to eat, and so on and so forth. So after being in these groups for several years, the circle I was in was invaded by trans-identifying adults, and they found our secret hashtags, you know, like pro-Anna, pro-Mia, sewer slide instead of suicide, because, you know, the algorithm tries to catch up and block these things, but kids are smarter than the adults, you know, making it up. They're always gonna be a couple steps ahead with the code names. But these trans-identifying adults got into my circle and were able to convince about half of us that we couldn't eat because we were born in the wrong body, and men and boys didn't need to do that. They didn't need to have a certain body type to not want to kill themselves. They were just men and boys. And so I started medicalization while I was seeing a nutritionist for the eating disorder. I was 16 by now, and I had made my period stop after the rape and loss of the child by not eating, and I didn't want that anymore. And my nutritionist made a new plan at 16 that caused me to gain weight, and I started my period again. And I told her that I hated my period and I wanted to be a boy. And at this point, my pediatric endocrinologist, who would within months begin prescribing me testosterone, started meeting with me in secret in my nutritionist's office. My parents believed they were taking me to see the nutritionist to be treated for my eating disorder, and I was seeing the endocrinologist instead. I started testosterone at 17. I had been in therapy for many years by now and had, by the age of 15, received a borderline personality disorder diagnosis. This diagnosis is not usually given to people under 21, but it was given to me because I had so many other diagnoses that it was like impossible. No one has like 20 mental illnesses, but PTSD and CPSD and all the eating disorders and anxiety and panic disorder, and they were just like, it's borderline, it's borderline. And borderline personality disorder, a main feature of this is it's a personality disorder. It changes your personality. Your BPD is a brain abnormality, the inability of the brain to grow during childhood due to extreme and repeated stress that never goes away. So people with BPD have an underdeveloped prefrontal cortex and amygdala, which controls recklessness, emotional regulation, all of that. And it took me, I've recently, in the past few years, been able to receive dialectical behavioral therapy, which is the treatment for borderline, but it was almost 10 years after being diagnosed with a personality disorder that I got treatment for it. But within 2 years of saying that I felt like a boy, I was given hormones and had my breasts cut off. I had my consultation for the radical double mastectomy when I was 17, and when I was 18, I asked for liposuction at the same time, and they told me no, because I couldn't consent, but I could consent to the removal of my breasts. My letter of recommendation for top surgery, that's an important point. The letters of recommendation, that's what you get from any certified or not certified therapist, and this letter of recommendation turns the doctor's office into the pharmacy into a place where you can go purchase. Like, you have a letter of recommendation, now get whatever you want. I told my therapist or my endocrinologist that I wanted to look different fast, and she gave me a high dose of testosterone at my request. I was making these requests while on antipsychotics and sedatives and tranquilizers. They had to ask me at the beginning of my therapy appointments what year it was and who the president was and what my name was. And I did not always know, and I still was able to consent to these procedures. But of course, I didn't consent to what I received. I was told it was possible to change sex, and that's not true. You can't change sex. I didn't become a boy. I became a girl and a woman with a destroyed endocrine system and hormonal imbalance. They told me that I was going to grow a penis, and that did not happen. It's, I would message my endocrinologist that I was in pain, my neck, my shoulders, my hands, my genitals, and she would say, we're inducing male puberty and growing pains hurt. But the male puberty never came, and it never stopped either. So eventually I reached a breaking point with the physical pain, and let me tell you, as a mentally ill teenager really struggling, I never believed that physical pain could come close to the insurmountable mental pain I was in, but it happened. It gets worse. The longer you stay on these drugs and the further you go, the worse it gets, and your ability to cope and rationalize and delude yourself, it doesn't stay as strong as that pain becomes. So I eventually quit testosterone, but I had never even heard the word detransition. I didn't know there were any detransitioners. I thought I was the first and only human on earth to regret going through transition. And when I contacted the gender clinic where I got my letter of recommendation, they told me for months that I never even went there. There was no record of me. My parents sent in like notified letters, so it was like they had to legally answer. And we used my old name, my new name, everything, you know, the legally changed stuff. They said no records, I'd never been there. And I hear this a lot from detransitioners, medical records being destroyed or just told they were never went there. Not to mention, there are no ICD codes for detransition. So as far as it goes, I'm legally a pregnant man and a happy outcome transgender person. So we don't know what the numbers of detransitioners are. There's no data-based way to track. You just have to hope people talk about it and are, willing to take death threats? People like to say, you know, oh, knee surgery has a 20% regret rate. But when people say they were harmed by a knee surgery or they regret it, do they get death and rape threats? No, they don't. Yeah, so I mean, yeah, it's all just a fraudulent lie. You know, I thought transition was an escape. I was convinced that all of my suffering was caused by being born in the wrong body. That's what it said in my letter of recommendation for top surgery. I also, my therapist who wrote the letter, the gender therapist was going to charge me almost $300 for the second letter of recommendation. The other therapist I'd been seeing for a few years who was treating me, she knew about the rape, the eating disorder, everything. She offered to write me one for free under the stipulation that I was able to leave my bedroom for an hour every day for 1 week. I failed to do that, and she wrote the letter anyway. So it's people who are truly not well, who want to change their gender. No one, especially young people, vulnerable people, women and girls, they don't change their gender because they're having a good time, you know? And people who have gender dysphoria, whatever that is, you know, I mean, I think everybody in this room qualifies for gender dysphoria.
Right.
Have you ever disliked, you know, it's something about being a woman, you have gender dysphoria, you know? And it's taking people who are having genuine and reasonable reactions to such a broken and messed up society and telling them that their bodies are wrong. And we're medicalizing bodies instead of treating society.
We can go ahead and take any questions if anybody has some questions. Yeah.
You were saying your mission to help girls. What do you think the best way? Do you try to like infiltrate these groups where they might be getting these messages to go trans, or how do you reach these girls?
So yeah, I don't directly speak to these young women because frankly most of them don't want to hear from me. I'm an evil turf, you know? So the way I just gotta do it is just talk about my story, tell them, and my lawsuit. I do have an ongoing lawsuit against the doctor. We need to get the message out there. Definitely appealing to the younger people would definitely be good. Bringing on more younger women, trying to find more younger women to give them these resources to try and show them that there's a light at the end of the tunnel and they don't need to do all this stuff to live happily.
I guess sometimes when you can't help people, all you can do is not make it worse. I hate that so much. I wish we could at least give everyone a clear head and let them make their decisions that way with the truth, right? But even if you aren't able to convince this young person to not transition, if you are continually there as a beacon of honesty, a lighthouse, and of kindness, of non-judgment, then if they do transition, which is ultimately not in your control, and they are harmed, they will know who to come to and who will understand and who cared. Just affirmation makes it worse. I guess I see it like offering a drink to an alcoholic. And we need to understand, like, when you think about someone that you're detoxing from like recreational drugs or alcohol, while they're on detox, they are gonna hate you. They're gonna curse your name, and they're gonna scream and cry, and they're gonna say they're gonna kill themselves, and they're gonna, because they think they need it. It's a form of self-medication. People are genuinely soothing pain, but what they are not putting on is not Band-Aids, it's rot, and it's making it like infected and bad. But while you're detoxing someone, they're gonna be angry at you and hurt, but when it's over, they won't be being poisoned anymore.
Many of the people in the trans community as well view our cause as very hateful, and I feel like taking an approach of love and understanding for these young girls would definitely help, and I know a lot of you have already started doing that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Wait, you've raised your hand like 12 times.
Yeah, thank you guys for being here. I imagine you guys are around the same age as me. I'm 23. I was on Tumblr when I was 13, the same age. The fringe discourse was really crazy.
The discourse over everything.
So crazy. But I know that Tumblr is kind of like a fading fad now, especially since I think that they banned pornography quite a bit ago. So I was just wondering, like, if the indoctrination isn't happening, if it's not happening in schools or social contagion via their peer groups, like, do you have any intel on, like, is it TikTok, Instagram, like, is there like a specific corner of the internet where these conversations are happening, or is it kind of all over?
It is definitely whether it's people talking about these are the pronouns of the day that you can use, or other just information that these people are giving out. And you're a young kid, you're gonna be like, oh, really, that's true? I'm not gonna go research that. Because you're gonna believe these well-esteemed, whether it be doctors that are on these platforms, other professionals, psychologists, anything like that.
I also want to say I don't see it as just social contagion. I think the word is like semantic or something, contagion, but it is the spread of a disease through the means of describing the disease. This happened specifically with bulimia. Forgive me on names and years, but a while ago in the 19-somethings, a doctor was seeing about 30 women for a strange and unknown eating disorder in which they would binge and purge. And after about 5 years of treating these women, the eating disorder became recognized as bulimia, a binging and purging disorder. And then the next year, it was put into the DSM-4, 3 or 4 maybe. Yeah, 4, yeah, DSM-4. And within 5 years of that, that number of 30 women who were binging and purging turned into 30 million women and girls, the same exact demographic of people who are transitioning right now. And this wasn't just like a malicious thing. Like, I don't think anybody was like, it's like cool if girls throw up, that's good for society. What happened was popular figures.
What states did you live in? Was this, what kind of insurance? Was this like, public Medicaid? And how did it affect school? I can't imagine that you were just going to high school every day while this was going on. If you could talk a little bit about this.
I was actually, and surprisingly, in the state of North Carolina, and this was all about 10 years ago that it was this bad, and so you can imagine how much worse it is. And unfortunately, it was Medicaid and y'all's taxpayer money that paid for my life-saving care.
I ended up starting testosterone in Rhode Island, and which is a very blue liberal state, as many of you may know. And it was covered under TRICARE, which is active and retired military insurance that I had as a dependent.
I was homeschooled, by the way, I was homeschooled.
Okay.
I do have the experience of going to public high school while actively transitioning, which I wouldn't wish on anybody because it was constant worrying and just constant anxiety and on the verge of a panic attack all the time of, are people gonna find me out? Are people gonna start bullying me? And of course, the fear-mongering of what if I get killed? So high school was a very stressful experience, which it is for everybody, but those are things I shouldn't have had to worry about.
I have two, and then two, could anyone have talked you out of it at that time? Could anyone could we have said anything that might have changed your mind before proceeding down that path?
So before I transitioned or came out about my transition, I was educated or brainwashed with information that looked like scientific data from trans activists, and I literally came out to my parents with a PowerPoint presentation of this information. Yeah, like a child. Yeah. My mother knew, that it wasn't true, but she was blackmailed and coerced, and my dad, something was clearly wrong. There was a reason I had been in and out of the hospital and trying to attempt suicide and all of that, and he was just like, we'll try, we'll see what works. But they were both threatened with my suicide, and the previous attempts, like I said, were used as proof. I learned a couple months ago. I remember the first appointment with the gender therapist, and that my mom was sobbing and wailing, and she ran out of the room, and the woman followed her, and I learned from my mom that what my gender therapist said was, it's time to be happy about a boy. Yeah, both of my parents struggle with mental illness, and they were definitely blackmailed. As far as if anyone could have told me anything differently, I don't know. Being that I had literal delusions, I don't know. I believed the lies that I needed to believe, and I ran to the arms that happened to be open. And those were the arms of bad people who lied. Gender affirming care isn't, or let's say, people don't do anything for no reason, right? There are benefits to gender affirming care. It feels good to be love bombed and told that you're gonna get better and you look so handsome and strong and in control and you're changing, and it feels good to be shirtless out in public and not be touched on your chest. All of those things, and it's gender euphoria, it's affirming. And on the other hand, I was a suicidal child, and I was being told by adults that other adults, particularly of the conservative, Republican, or Christian variety, wanted to kill me. I was told that the gays and the trans people were all going to be getting number tattoos like Jewish people, and we were going to be rounded up and killed in gas chambers. And I believed it. I literally remember thinking, wow, Christians and Republicans and stuff must be smart, because I want to kill me too. So I couldn't be convinced. Any kindness seemed like a lie or a manipulation to hide the future killings or whatever. I was genuinely a delusional child. So I think laws preventing doctors from helping you make it worse are the only thing that would have stopped it.
What was the full question again?
Parents' reaction, and then could we have talked you out of it?
Okay, gotcha. So my parents were very of the, please wait until you're 18 at first, until I was going through a therapist, and she was desperately trying to have my parents be like, you need to affirm her. But nothing really happened until we moved to Rhode Island, and I was inpatient at a child psychiatric hospital, where multiple doctors cornered my parents, telling them that I was going to kill myself if they didn't do anything. And that included the likes of Michelle Forcier, and Dr. Jason Rafferty, who, while I was under his care and actively declining, writing the gender affirming care model for the American Academy of Pediatrics.
Wow.
Honestly, I don't know if you could have told me anything. I was, again, like Prisha, so under this delusion of like, this is gonna fix me, this is gonna fix me. And you're being loved, Mom, and you're being told by people you're so brave, and you're so cool for coming out, and even trans people saying things bad about cis people.
I also thought of this, there's a lot of hope in being told that you were born in the wrong body. Because if you were born in the wrong body and you can just take hormones and have surgery and then your body and your brain are okay, then that means there's something you can do, that there's something you can chase, there's a cure. If you're sad because your parents are getting divorced and it has nothing to do with you, or kids are bullying at you at school because kids are mean, or puberty is hard because puberty is hard, then there's no hope. You know, there's no treatment. What are you supposed to tell a kid? Wait, time, you know what I mean? Unfortunately, that is the cure. Time is often the only cure for many things, especially things like puberty and grief, but no child wants to hear that. I mean, like, if you think about it, you know, like a 4-year-old thinks that a year is a really long time because a year is a fourth of their life. Like, now a year is like a 26th of my life or a 40th of your life or whoever, but telling a child like wait a year, 2 years, 5 years, and then you won't want to kill yourself, but if it's your fault and there's something wrong with you and your body and you can change it, there's hope, you know? So I guess we have to give girls and young people and vulnerable people an actual form of hope that actually exists. Because being disillusioned is heartbreaking. It is horrible to cut off body parts and poison yourself and destroy your health for something that didn't even exist and was never going to come.
Amen.
There needs to be more women speaking out about the things that they have gone through. And sadly, in our patriarchal society, that's not so easy. So we need to show young girls that puberty is hard, and many women go through things that make them not like themselves. But that's okay, because you can come out on the other end and be a successful woman with a happy family, or with 12 cats, whatever makes you happy.
I appreciate everything you've shared, and I'm so sorry that you guys have gone through what you've gone through. I know a young woman in her mid-20s, and she has gone through transition, and now she's detransitioning, and she's struggling.
And that's just the detransition sector. And there are new stories popping up every day of people expressing their regrets. And many of these people are too scared to come out about it, because it essentially is social suicide. You will be outcast from your friend groups. You will be labeled as a person filled with hatred who wants people dead because of what happened to you.
And do you have to be sub-transition, do you have to be detransitioner to be in the group?
No.
You don't have to. Many people do go on there for educational purposes, but that is still a very huge number.
And what is its name?
Detrans. It's the subcommunity of detrans. And there's also another one called actual detrans, which is, I believe, only detransitioners, which still has like an alarming amount of people in it. Like still thousands of people in it.
I just wanted to add that the lesbian community embraces, most of the lesbian community embraces detransitioners and is making a big effort to pull them into our fold. There are so many lesbian women that are told, you know, being gay is bad, blah, 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 and they get hijacked into transitioning, especially young
these girls are being told, well, you like this, and that, based on, sex stereotypes, so they're saying, so you might not be, so you're not a woman. And it makes me so sad. I see so many of these young women, I have known so many of these young women who started off as lesbian identifying and ended up being gay trans men. It is truly an erasure of sexuality, which is, of course, not a choice, but they're making it seem like it is somehow a choice.
Pat lady.
What's your name?
I just wanted to say that a lot of the young detransitioned lesbians that I know are meeting up with each other at Big Mouth Girl, which happens at the Michigan Women's Conference.
I went last year and I'm going again this year if anyone wants to see me.
Are guys gonna try to infiltrate that?
Either of you guys choose.
I wondered if you could talk about the next Benedict case and the propaganda around advocacy from last week.
So it makes me absolutely sick that the death of this young girl, which was not even, the cause of death wasn't even told at the time. We knew little to no information. And so many people rushed to use this young girl's death as fodder and as proof that they're being killed in schools or something, and blaming women online for this young girl's death, even though it was proven that she started the fight, and we still don't know her cause of death, I believe. I believe it was ruled that it wasn't from the fight that she was in. So it just makes me absolutely sick that these people are so quick to jump on that and use this young girl's death. And we barely know anything about this young girl. Her life isn't being celebrated. The only thing being celebrated about her is that she was non-binary. The only other things we knew about her was that she liked Minecraft and music or something. This young girl, so many people rallying saying that they're celebrating this young girl's life when they know literally nothing about her. They're not making an effort to try and know more about this girl's life, and it just makes me sick to my stomach.
Are we sure she was a girl or was she?
No, yeah, she was a trans-identified female.
She was a Native American,
Mm-hmm.
Two-Spirit, Osage Indian.
Yeah.
There's a huge cultural component to that, and I just shed a tear.
It is cultural, but Two-Spirit the term wasn't invented until the 90s, I believe. So it is using these Native American beliefs of intersex people to push their agenda, basically.
I also just want,
Caveat about this loving lesbian community. As a lesbian in San Francisco, that's not my experience. This is woke city. And young lesbians are fierce and violent defenders of men who
whether it's a choice made out of coercion or mental illness or delusion or simply fetish, transition is a choice, and none of these other things are.
One more question. I'm just curious about your experience on testosterone, and I've heard some people report that they have like rage, they have an increased anger and proneness to violence, and I've heard there was a school shooting, and it just kind of makes me wonder, like, if these hormones might make you so, that plus other things may make you lash out in violence and do things that harm others.
Absolutely. I never really had an anger problem before I started testosterone, and it ended when I quit testosterone. I still to this day, when I get hot, it makes me feel angry. Like literally just like I'm more hot, I have hot flashes, and when it was on testosterone, it was worse. My dad used to make me go outside and chop wood for the fireplace with an axe to get my anger out. And it made me a lot more confident, a lot more reckless. Women on testosterone, describing the effects of testosterone is almost like other people describing the effects of like cocaine. Like they say like you feel like you could like just fight a shark, like just walk into the street, and like the recklessness and impulsiveness, not to get like too dark or whatever, but I had suicide attempts and I was cutting before medicalization, and my methods of, I'm trying so hard to like, my methods of self-harm were surgical and precise. With the borderline, I believed that my emotions could not fit in my body, they were too big. So, you know, blood and stuff, like certain amounts, whatever, you know what I'm trying to say. And when I was on the testosterone, it wasn't surgical anymore, it was a lot more reckless and dangerous and deeper, and I had to be hospitalized more. I have this one specific instance, and I have the scars everywhere, all over my stomach, all over, everything. I was trying to cut one leg, and I went so hard and so fast that I cut them both. And every time I found out from my medical records that every time they increased my dose of testosterone and the behavior would come worse, they would also just up my dose of antipsychotics or tranquilizers or sedatives.
I do have a similar experience. I never really was an angry person before testosterone. I was kind of just depressed. And testosterone literally gave me like the urge to hurt people sometimes when I get so mad. And that's something I never felt at that time, and it was so foreign. And it was just looking back on it, I'm just like, oh my God. Like, it was not in my nature to feel that way. It was not in my nature to feel that way, and chemicals made me feel that way.
Can I add something too? The sexuality stuff regarding testosterone is also significant and leads to danger for women mixed with the culture of pornography. So this is embarrassing to talk about, but I will, because I know a lot of other detrans women did this, and women who are currently trans-identifying. I went on Grindr. Does anyone know what Grindr is?
Yes.
Okay, good. Glad I don't have to explain that. Yeah. I remember when I was like 16 and my little sister was like 13 or 14, and she told me that men get to have sex and sex happens to women. And there are so many girls who believe, girls who are growing up and becoming sexual and women, you know, and having genuine sexual desires, like wanting to have sex that's nice and consensual, and then being bombarded with pornography and all of that. And I was convinced that to have consensual sex that I was in control of, and that I liked, I had to be a man, you know? And so if you want to, if you're straight and you like men and you want to have consensual sex with a man, and sex that isn't rape with a man, you also have to be a man. And there are just so many girls that believe this, not to mention, you know, testosterone making you like really aroused. Like it's actually like painful, the amount of blood that goes to your ruined genitals. Yeah, so you seek out other people, other predators on websites like Grindr, and they come to your house, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work. We are telling women and girls that they can become men, but like I said, it is not possible to change sex. Instead of, you know, calling it a pussy and, you know, and degrading your vagina and all of that, they just call you a bonus hole boy, and they treat you the same exact way.
Prisha, yesterday I got a chance to talk to you a little bit on kind of the spiritual side of things, which is fans of women taking the power into their own hands and making change. Both of you are now heavily engaged in having taken a lot of power for yourselves and speaking truth to power. Prisha, you travel all over the country testifying on legislative bills, right, that will prevent other women from going through what you have gone through. And Isabelle, you're suing the American Academy of Pediatrics, right? So I think while every woman in this room wants to hug you and is so sorry for the journey of the underworld that you have gone through, we are also huge admirers of the way that you have come out as powerful women on the other side of this. And I just want to express that to you and thank you for having the courage to do what you're doing.